Morning, everybody. This is Bill Carlson with Café on Tampa. Welcome to our normal time that we usually have Café on Tampa meetings on Friday mornings. I've got today Senator Darryl Rouson, who's spoken to us a couple times in the past. And Senator Rouson, tell us about yourself, please.
Well, thank you and good morning. Thank you for having me. To the membership of Café Con and those who are just listening in, welcome. And I'm grateful to be here. Before I was a legislator, I was a litigator, fighting for the disenfranchised, fighting for the people. And Rubenstein law that supports my public service has allowed me to continue fighting from the Capitol House to the courtroom. 800 FL Legal for all of your injury needs. This is National Volunteer Week, and I want to thank all the volunteers that are going out in Tampa Bay, from serving meals to running errands to checking on the elderly, checking on others who are isolating, living in high anxiety and fear. Grateful for your public service. We can't do it without volunteers, so congratulations to all the volunteers. I'm Darryl Rouson. I serve Senate District 19, which is portions of Hillsborough and Pinellas County. And I'll get to the point. This morning, I'm glad to say that the retroactive nature of unemployment benefits, the governor announced it, I guess, yesterday. The Orlando Sentinel is reporting it. And that'll be welcome relief if we can get this broken system working faster. The people will know that their benefits will apply, not just for the date of application, but will go back to the date they were furloughed or the date they lost the job. And that's exciting news. There were 3,600 bills filed this legislative session, and 208 of them will make it to the governor's desk. A $93 billion budget was passed, and we did some good things. Session ended just about 30 days ago. At the time it ended, we didn't know what we know now in terms of this pandemic, but we put $52 million in the budget earmarked for the virus, and we gave the governor spending authority of federal dollars without having to come back to the legislature. An overview of the budget tells us that we did some good things in education. We raised teacher salaries. We got rid of the best and brightest, which has been a Democratic scream for a long time. And we increased starting pay of teachers. We did right by government employees. This is the first time in several years that they've gotten raises. We did good by the environment. Hundreds of millions of dollars going to get rid of green algae, Everglades cleanup, restoration. And we didn't sweep for the first time in 11 or 12 years the Sadowski Housing Trust Fund. We increased.
I just had to stop you there for a second. What do you think is going to happen to that now with the budget changing in the next few months? Do you think that will be undone, or will it stay the way it is?
Well, the budget, the only change in the budget in the next, until June 30th will be the governor's veto pen. The budget is what the budget was when we left at March 30th. But some people say that we're going to go back for a special session to adjust it. But there are others that believe that there's sufficient reserves, $3 billion in reserves, and enough federal dollars coming down to absorb any negative impact that it might have before June 30th, and that it would be something for the next administration to backfill.
Great, thank you.
Prison spending, we did well by prison spending. We created 32 full-time employment positions for wellness specialists to get rid of inmate idleness. We know that idle minds are the devil's workshop, and we need to get back to programs in prison. But what we didn't do with prisons was we didn't consider medical conditional release or elderly conditional release. And in retrospect now, I think that's become very important with the virus outbreaks in prisons. We could have relieved some of the overcrowded conditions and stopped contributing to the outbreak. The legislation that I'm most proud of was Jordan's Law. Some of you saw the media reports on that. That was the 2-year-old that was reunited with his mother, and he was found dead 4 days later. The sheriff, the law enforcement, the police department, the child welfare agencies were not communicating. This law will not prevent another Jordan's death, but it will help in terms of communication amongst the agencies, which hopefully will prevent another death. I'm sorry. One of the things I'm most proud of, in addition to Jordan's Law, is the Road to Recovery appropriation. I got $3.5 million in the budget to go towards substance abuse treatment and mental health treatment. That'll be shared with some groups in Hillsborough like DACO and ACTS and other groups. And it has not become inconsequential. We know that people right now are living with high anxiety, with fear, with intrepidation, with uncertainty, lost jobs, isolating. And we're worried about relapsing. We're worried about post-trauma stress of our medical personnel, of our first responders once we get to the other side of this crisis. So mental health is very important. It is as important as physical health.
Why don't you, I'll interrupt you for a second. There may be some people listening who don't know your story. Would you mind taking 30 seconds or a minute and just tell the background on your story and why mental health is an important issue for you?
Well, I'm a recovering addict. On March 17th, 4 days after we ended session, I celebrated 22 years of clean time, 22 years of sobriety. And this was the first time in 22 years that I could not pick up my medallion, my sobriety medallion, at a meeting and get group hugs, group therapy. They awarded me my medallion virtually. But that's why substance use disorders, mental health is very important to me.
Yeah, congratulations and thanks for all your service in those 22 years also. Sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead. You have a whole list of things you've done. Please talk about it.
Well, I'm very proud of the budget. The budget passed the Senate 32-0, not one no vote. That's because we were allowed to participate in it, to influence it. And I'm very appreciative. I hope the governor doesn't have the heavy veto pen. But if he does, we have to understand that we're living in uncharted times.
Just to remind anybody who's watching, if you're watching live, Catholic on Tampa Style, we want to hear questions from the audience. So the audience is online today, and you can post questions underneath the video, and we'll try to get to as many of them as we can. Could you just tell everybody about your district, the geographic area it covers, and are there any differences in how this current pandemic has affected your district? We know you represent the whole state, and you've been the legislative leader last year for the entire region. But tell us about your district itself, please.
Well, of the 7 senators in Tampa Bay area, I'm the only one that has both Hillsborough and Pinellas. About 60% of my district is Hillsborough County. It begins at Fowler Avenue, travels south, picking up Jackson Heights, Seminole Heights, Robles Park, Sulphur Springs, East Tampa, portions of East Tampa, down to the Beer Can Building, 1 block before City Hall. And then I pick up all of Ybor City, large chunks of Brandon, Riverview, and Apollo Beach. Then it jumps the bay. And I begin at 22nd Avenue North in St. Petersburg, south, picking up all of downtown. So I have the unique perspective of representing both downtowns, picking up Midtowns, Lakewood Estates, Coquina Key, Bahama Shores, to the Skyway Bridge and all of Gulfport. That's about 40% of my district. And I'm very honored to represent this area. We have some low-income portions. We have some challenged areas as well as some affluent areas. And this virus has been disproportionately impacting minority communities and low-income areas. They'll be announcing a testing site, I think today it opens up, USF Health, over in Tampa in a low-income area.
You mentioned both downtowns. Now, Tampa and St. Pete, like other downtowns around the country, have really grown in the last few years. we've seen Manhattan get really badly hit by this, maybe from the proximity of living at high density. So high density has been a good thing. It's been a desirable thing for the last 10 or 20 years. What do you think will happen to human behavior and human patterns? Do you think this pandemic will adversely affect downtowns?
Well, I hope it doesn't, and we can only be prayerful about it and work towards the vibrancy returning, which is important. Both downtowns have experienced renaissance, and it's been exciting. The buildings going up, the condo units, the apartment units. However, we do need more affordable so that workforce can live and work and play in their own neighborhood.
You mentioned Sadowski. So if that's funded, what do you think will be the impact of it? How many units are we talking about like in your district or in our two counties?
Well, it's going to be fully funded. That's over $300 million. We diverted $2 billion over the last 10 years to other things, and this year it's fully funded. So it will help SHIP. It will help sale programs, first-time home buyers. It will help developers who agree to build affordable housing, cut the costs of building. And so I hope that it leads towards more affordability of housing.
We have one question from the audience. As you've seen, there's been a breakdown in the unemployment system where they had to switch to, I think, hand forms because the electronic system wasn't working. The question is, do you think there will be some kind of legislative investigation of that, or where do you think it will go from here?
Well, somebody needs to be investigated. I don't know whether we're talking about Deloitte Touche or someone else, but for $77 million for us to get a broken system and then have to spend $100 million to try to get folks speed and answers in getting their applications filed and benefits paid, there needs to be some type of legislative inquiry, and I would support that.
A follow-up question was, is there anything that the legislature can do to fix it, or is it only an executive administration issue?
At this point, it's an executive administration issue, but if we go back in special session, there are those who are calling for an expansion of the agenda beyond just the budget to do something like this.
What else do you think the legislature will do regarding the current pandemic? Do you think there will be a special session? And whether there is or not, what do you think that the legislature can do to help us to be better prepared next time?
Well, I'd like to see a special session, but many of us in the legislature, some of us are at risk. And the way to do that would be to do it safely. There are those who don't want to travel back in this pandemic, those who are at risk for traveling back. And if we can gather safely, I think it makes sense to do that.
Does the Constitution allow for a Zoom meeting or electronic meeting, or you have to meet in person?
Not at this point. It means you have to meet in person.
Is it constitutional, do you know, or is it just a rules issue?
I'm not sure, but I believe it's constitutional.
Yeah. Sorry to put you on the spot. You're a lawyer, but you're not a Florida constitutional lawyer. So thank you for trying to answer that. Well, what else do you observe out there right now? What are some of the other needs, unique needs in your district and in Pinellas and Hillsborough County that you'd like to bring up to legislature, or do you think that other statewide leaders should address?
Well, the Office of Minority Health, which has been slowly defunded over the years, the social inequities have given glaring expose to the medical inequities, the health disparities that exist. I think that's an area that we could actually beef up. It made good sense before. It should make good sense now.
Let me ask you a question. So some of our regulars know I started a website called tampascorecard.com, working with Moaz Limayam from USF College of Business, and the Tampa Bay Partnership working with USF has also created a study, and there are a bunch out there. These studies show a lot of things looking at real data. But one of them is the racial inequities and gender inequities. So one on the gender inequities, in St. Petersburg, the difference in pay, average difference in pay between men and women is $3,000 a year. In Tampa, it's $9,000 a year. So on average, in Tampa, women earn $9,000 less than men. And if I remember correctly, the racial disparity in Tampa is about $10,000. What do you think we ought to do to better close those gaps and also address some of our issues of poverty? Tampa has the second highest poverty rate of any major city in the state of Florida. What are some of the things that we can do as a state and a region to solve those issues?
Well, it may sound like a broken record, but we need to increase access to affordable housing. We need to give people a living wage. And it's kind of ironic now that the very waiters, waitresses, line workers, people that we were pushing to make $15 an hour are the ones who are suffering the most right now. And we need to take care of our fellow brothers and sisters. So I think that the legislature could look at minimum wage. We could look at affordable housing, and we could look at more economic development. One of the things we could do is get rid of a lot of vacant lots in East Tampa and in Midtown and St. Pete by building on them.
By the way, Leroy Moore is on, and he says, thank you for your support of the Sadowski. When the Tampa Housing Authority spoke recently to the city of Tampa, they said that the official number, if I remember correctly, was that we have a shortage of 20,000 homes. 20,000 people need affordable homes and can't find them. But the unofficial number is probably 50,000 because a lot of people have given up and aren't applying anymore. That's just, I think, in the city of Tampa. So the problem is much bigger on a statewide level. Sadowski, I guess, would be a big solution, but this seems like an insurmountable gap for us to fill. What other solutions are there out there? What else could we be doing about that?
Dedication. We have to be committed to making this happen. And listening to the people, hearing their needs and responding as accurately and as adequately as we can.
Great. What do you think we need to do, or the legislature could do, or we need to do as leaders in the region to address the economic situation? Before this, it seems like forever that we've been in the confines here, but before we had like a 3.5% unemployment mostly throughout the state, which was an unheard of low percentage rate. Now we're approaching, Florida Chamber says 20%. When the stay-at-home order is lifted, a lot of people will go back to work, but a lot of those businesses are not going to reopen, and a lot of those jobs won't exist. What else can we do to revive the economy?
Well, we have to be committed to reviving the economy. I believe that we do need to reopen and try to return to some semblance of normalcy, but we can't let our head and the economy overrule our heart and the health and safety of families and individuals who might be at risk. We must practice social distancing. We must listen to science and medicine and let them guide us in this reopening process. And frankly, I think we're reopening a little too early.
By the way, just for anybody who's logged in recently, as is Café con Tampa Stop, if you have any questions, post them underneath the video and we'll try to get to them. Senator Rouson, before this crisis hit, what did you think, or what did you expect the agenda items would be for the next legislative session? What do you think are the big issues that are going to come up in committees other than the pandemic?
Well, some of the biggest issues are always education, public safety, and health. Those are the big three ticket items. People need to have a free, fully funded, high quality public education. People need to know that their neighborhoods are safe, and that means good law enforcement and also good jobs. When people are working and are committed otherwise to advancement, they don't have time, and nor do they have the interest in committing crimes. We need to do reentry programs so that those who are coming out have occupations and skills that will help them reintegrate. We need to continue working on voting, making sure that voting rights are not suppressed and people have an opportunity to participate in the governance process of their living.
Tell us what the status of that is. I've been following in the media, but what's the current status of it, maybe before the pandemic?
Well, the courts have given a smackdown to the Florida legislature for trying to define voting rights to be dependent upon being able to pay all of your fines and fees and court costs. It's sort of like the old poll tax issue. Only the rich can afford to pay fines, fees, and costs. The poor or the challenged cannot, therefore they cannot vote. I think that we'll have to address this issue. The courts have demanded it, and the opportunity will come for us to do that. Access to healthcare is also important. People in this pandemic, those who were working without insurance are now doubly hit. So those are some big ticket items.
You've also been a big supporter of the arts and historic preservation. You said you have Ybor in your district. You have historic areas of St. Pete in your district, Seminole Heights, I think Tampa Heights. Tell us more about what you've done to support the arts and historic preservation during your terms.
Well, as you know, 2 years ago, the arts got cut 90% in the budget. I have often said that I don't think there's a senator in the state of Florida that has more arts, theaters, museums in their district than me. Because of the configuration of my district, I represent Morsani, Strass, Tampa Theater, Tampa Museum of the Art, Glacier Children's Museum, the Hard Rock, the amphitheater and the fairgrounds, the Improv in Ybor City. Then when you come across the bridge, I represent Chihuly, Dolly, Morian, Imagine, Great Explorations, the new James Museum of Western Civilization, the Craftsman's Art Gallery that Rudy Ciccarella is getting ready to open up, the Palladium, Mahaffey, American Stage, are all in the St. Pete portion of my district. And I've worked hard to restore funding to the arts. I've often said that so goes the arts, so goes the health of many of our communities. I'm very glad to have worked hard on those issues and to restore at least about 50% those cuts that were taken the year before.
So for anybody who doesn't know about the arts or may not support the arts, can you explain to them why it's important to fund it? There are lots of competing interests in Tallahassee and in local government. If you're looking at having better education or more housing, why should we fund the arts?
Well, for two reasons: the economy and our health. The economy, the arts brings jobs. It brings spending in restaurants. The health of a person, mental health particularly, is very important. And so goes the arts, so goes the health of our communities. It's an expression, it's an outlet. It's the accent to social structures.
And you've been able to bring millions of dollars, I think, over the last few years to different arts groups, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you for doing that. Thanks for supporting it. And, we always talk at Café on Tampa about how the arts really is an industry. And in St. Pete, at the St. Pete EDC, it is an actual cluster. Creative art and design is a cluster that includes everybody from, Mark Ailing, sculptor, to graphic design people, to animators, to the Jabil industrial design people. Lee Morgan says thank you to you and Senator Cruz for your support of funding the statewide effort to locate and document lost Black cemeteries. Can you tell us about that?
Well, yes, we filed the bill. I think it was 220, Senate Bill 220. And I want to thank Senator Cruz for her leadership on getting that filed and her inclusion of me, Representative Diane Hart, Representative Fentress Driscoll, and Leader Gibson. All of us worked together on that. What we were able to get, since we couldn't create the task force, it died in its last committee, I believe. We did get an appropriation put in the budget of $50,000 for Zion and $50,000 for the property at King's High School. That will go towards creating a memorial garden or marker or something. We have to come back next year and work on this task force to help find other similar forgotten cemeteries in
So
the
not to
state.
get too wonkish for a minute, but as I understand it, the state requires like $100,000 trust fund, and not to talk about any particular cemeteries, but there's like $100,000 trust fund for privately owned cemeteries. And if a family member passes away, or if the company that owns the cemetery doesn't do well financially, then it could go into receivership, and local government, state government could end up funding it. So you might have a situation where a family was able to take in all the income over a long number of years, and then suddenly it's dumped on the government. And if it's ignored, like in the past, we could end up with another Zion. What else do you think we ought to do, state or local government, to regulate private cemeteries to prevent the next Zion from happening?
Well, that's why it's important to get a task force, a group of committed people to study this issue and come back with recommendations to the legislature for how we can, number one, prevent it from happening. Number two, if it falls into disrepair or bad condition and the ownership dies or goes away, what can we as a state do to help these families remember their loved ones? I mean, these are real human beings. We cannot look into their eyes, but we can tell their stories, and we can make sure that the dignity that they expected in burial is honored.
Yeah, thank you for your support on that. Jim Blyer asked, with hundreds of thousands of pensioners relying on the Florida retirement system, how healthy is its balance sheet?
Well, the leadership in Tallahassee believe it's fairly healthy. Pension funds and have run deficits in other states, but I think Florida is fairly healthy.
Yeah, I remember there was that scare like 10 years ago. Thank God Alex Sink was there as CFO and helped turn that around. Any other important issues you'd like to talk about? Anything else you think, like your vision for our region, vision for Florida?
Well, I'm looking forward to getting back to Tallahassee. I'm going to work hard every day. We've got like 50 days till qualifying June 12th. At this point, I have unanimous support of all of the Democratic senators in the state have endorsed me for re-election, and I'm very grateful and humbled to have that support. I don't have a primary right now, but anything can happen. I don't take anything for granted, and I'm going to work hard every day to show the people that I care about Tampa Bay. I'm a regional senator, not just a parochial one.
And you also cross the aisle a lot. Sometimes you get criticized for crossing the aisle, but from what I've seen anyway, you get results because of it, because you're in the minority party, and if you can negotiate, you can get more than someone who doesn't believe in consensus. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, it always made sense for me to collaborate where possible, but stand strong on certain principles that are unwaverable. And I've tried to do that. Much of what you get in the legislative process is because not only do you have a good idea, but you convince others that your idea is good, and then it becomes their idea, and they work with you to get it done. I've been in the minority party for 11 years now in Tallahassee. It's not a fun place to be, but if you want to be effective for your district, you need to learn to build relationships with those who hold the power. And that's what I've tried to do to the benefit of my district.
Great. Well, on that note, any other thoughts or ideas you'd like to give us?
Go Café Con Tampa. Can't wait till we get back to the Oxford Exchange.
Yeah, me too. And thanks everybody for getting up so early in the morning. Thank you, Senator. Also, best wishes to you and your family.
Thank you. And everybody be safe. These are difficult times. Reach out to somebody today. Call somebody that you haven't talked to in a while. Check on them. People are isolating. They're living with fears, high anxiety. Impress upon folks that mental health is very much important as physical health.
Great. Thank you so much.